When Keanu Reeves attends an exclusive Hollywood gala, the night is supposed to be just another elegant affair. Champagne, flashing cameras, and scripted conversations. But in the shadows of the lavish event, Maria, a quiet cleaning lady with decades of service, holds on to a single hope: to keep a promise to her sick grandson. All she needs is one signature, just a name on a page. But as she reaches for the notebook, she has no idea that this small act will cost her everything, and even less idea that soon Keanu himself would find out. What happens next, no one in that hotel or the world would ever forget. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The Los Angeles sky gleamed with the glow of flashing lights. Luxury cars arrived one after another at the entrance of the Grand Crystal Hotel, one of the city's most prestigious venues. Celebrities, business moguls, and entertainment industry elites paraded down the red carpet, under the watchful eyes of reporters and photographers. For the world, it was just another glamorous Hollywood night. For Maria Esteban, 62 years old, it was just another shift at work. While the guests sipped on champagne and nibbled on exquisite hors d'oeuvres, Maria and the other members of the cleaning staff moved discreetly through the hotel's hidden hallways, ensuring that every corner remained spotless. She wore her navy blue uniform and pushed a cart filled with cleaning supplies. A small radio accompanied her as always, but tonight her thoughts were elsewhere. Miles away, in a small home, her 9-year-old grandson, Tomas, lay in a hospital bed, waiting eagerly. He had been hospitalized for weeks, battling a rare medical condition that prevented him from running and playing like other children. His greatest refuge was the world of movies, and no one inspired him more than Keanu Reeves. Thomas collected posters, watched every one of the actors' films, and spent hours drawing scenes of John Wick, Neo, and Constantine. But he had one special dream: to get an autograph from Keanu himself. "Grandma, do you promise? If you ever meet him, will you ask for an autograph for me?" His voice still echoed in Maria's mind. Maria never made promises she couldn't keep. But that day, seeing the sparkle in her grandson's eyes, she did something she rarely did. She took a chance. "I promise, my love. If I ever meet him, I will bring you his autograph." And now there he was, Keanu Reeves, just a few steps away. He had just arrived at the event, maintaining his usual calm and composed demeanor. Dressed in an impeccable black suit, he stood out, not for extravagance, but for his natural grace and humility. Unlike many stars, he didn't seem rushed or impatient. Maria watched him from a distance, trying to ignore the pounding in her chest. "This is my chance," she thought. She slid her hand into the pocket of her apron and felt the small notebook Thomas had filled with drawings, leaving one blank space, waiting for the signature of his biggest hero. The promise was about to be fulfilled, but Maria had no idea that this simple act would change her life forever. She slides her hand into her pocket, feeling Thomas's notebook. "Tonight, I keep my promise," she thinks, unaware of the cost that would come with it. Maria stood in the corner of the grand hall, gripping the small notebook inside her apron pocket. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and a deep sense of anxiety swirled inside her. She watched as Keanu Reeves moved through the crowd, stopping occasionally to greet people with his characteristic kindness. He didn't rush conversations, didn't brush past people as some celebrities did. He truly engaged. But still, the doubt crept into Maria's mind. What if they throw me out? What if I lose my job? She had worked at the Grand Crystal Hotel for nearly 20 years, always staying in the shadows, cleaning up after the glamorous and the wealthy. The unspoken rule had always been clear: staff must never interact with guests. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the notebook. But what if I don't? What if I walk away and let Thomas down? She could see him in her mind, her grandson, his frail body covered by a hospital blanket, his eyes bright with hope. She could hear his little voice filled with excitement when he talked about Keanu Reeves, when he imagined what it would be like to meet him. That was all Maria needed. A deep breath, a step forward. She weaved through the lavishly dressed guests, careful not to draw attention to herself, moving closer to Keanu. He had just finished speaking with a group of people and now stood by the bar, sipping water. This was her moment. Maria's hands trembled as she took the notebook from her pocket and clutched it to her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but felt her voice fail her. "No, Maria, do this for Thomas." Another breath. Then finally she spoke. "Mr. Reeves, excuse me." Keanu turned, his gentle expression showing no hint of irritation, only genuine curiosity. "I don't mean to disturb you, but my grandson is your biggest fan. He's been sick for a long time, and your movies, they mean the world to him." She hesitated for a second, then extended the notebook with both hands. "I promised him that if I ever had the chance, I would get him your autograph. Could you sign this for him?" A brief pause. Maria held her breath. Then a warm smile spread across Keanu's face. "Of course," he said softly. "What's his name?" "Thomas." Keanu took the notebook from Maria's hands and flipped through the pages, his eyes widening as he saw Thomas's drawings, detailed sketches of John Wick, Neo, and Constantine. "Wow, he's really talented," Keanu said, visibly touched. Maria's throat tightened. She watched as Keanu carefully wrote a message inside the notebook. "To Thomas, keep dreaming big. With love, Keanu Reeves." He signed his name with a flourish, then closed the notebook and handed it back to her. "Tell Tomas he's amazing, and that I hope he keeps drawing." Maria felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to him." "It's my pleasure," Keanu replied with a nod before someone else called for his attention. Maria clutched the notebook against her chest, her heart soaring. She had done it. She had kept her promise. But as she turned to leave, a cold voice cut through the air behind her. "Maria, we need to talk. Now." She froze. She recognized that voice instantly. The supervisor. Maria smiled down at the autograph, feeling victorious. But before she could put it away, a cold voice echoed behind her. "Can we talk for a moment?" Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Slowly, she turned to face the source of the voice. Her supervisor, Mr. Langley, stood there, arms crossed, his sharp eyes filled with disapproval. He was a man in his mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in a dark suit and always watching. Maria had never liked him. He treated the cleaning staff like they were invisible unless he needed something. But right now he saw her, and he was not happy. "Follow me," he ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. Maria's heart pounded. The joyful moment from just seconds ago had completely shattered. She looked down at the notebook in her hands, Keanu's message to Thomas glowing like a beacon of hope. "Please don't take this away from me," she thought. She followed Langley through a side hallway, away from the event, until they reached a small service corridor. The walls were bare, the lights dimmer, out of sight. Langley turned to face her. "What do you think you were doing out there?" Maria hesitated. I just asked for an autograph, sir. It was for my grandson. I don't care," Langley snapped, cutting her off. "You know the rules, Maria. Employees are not to engage with guests. You've been here long enough to know that. But no excuses." His face was stone cold, unreadable. "You've put me in a difficult position. If I let this go, other staff might think they can approach guests too. I can't allow that." Maria's stomach twisted. "Sir, I've worked here for almost 20 years. I have never asked for anything. I have never broken any rules. It was just a small favor, just a signature for my grandson. Please." Langley's expression didn't change. "You should have thought about that before breaking policy." Maria clenched her fists, trying to keep the tears at bay. She wanted to fight. She wanted to scream that this was unfair. But what could she do? She was just a cleaning lady. Langley took a slow breath, and then with absolute finality, he spoke the words she dreaded the most. "Pack your things, you're fired." The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired for asking for an autograph. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall. "Please, Mr. Langley, this job is all I have." "You should have thought of that before breaking the rules." His voice was devoid of sympathy. Maria swallowed hard. She could beg, she could plead. But she knew it wouldn't matter. He had already made up his mind. Slowly, she nodded, her fingers tightening around the notebook. "Understood." Without another word, she turned and walked away. She didn't wait for him to escort her out. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But as she stepped outside the Grand Crystal Hotel, the cold night air hit her like a slap. Everything she had worked for, gone. She wandered through the streets, gripping the notebook like a lifeline. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She thought of Thomas. How would she tell him? How could she explain that she lost her job, the only source of income they had, just for trying to make him happy? Her hands trembled. She glanced down at the autograph. To Thomas, keep dreaming big, with love, Keanu Reeves. A message of hope, but at what cost? Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself. She would not let this break her. She would find another job. She would figure something out. But what Maria didn't know was that her story was far from over. Because somewhere inside the hotel, someone had just found out what had happened, and that someone was Keanu Reeves. Maria clutched the notebook, staring at the streets ahead. She had no idea that inside the hotel, Keanu had just learned the truth. Inside the Grand Crystal Hotel, the gala continued. Glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, and Hollywood's elite indulged in an evening of luxury. Keanu Reeves remained unaware, for now. He was engaged in a conversation with the director when a nervous voice interrupted him. "Mr. Reeves, I need to tell you something." Keanu turned and saw a waiter, a young man in his 20s, shifting uncomfortably. He looked around as if making sure no one else was listening. "It's about the woman who asked for your autograph." Keanu's brow furrowed. "The cleaning lady." The waiter nodded. They fired her for that, sir." Keanu's entire demeanor changed instantly. "What?" The warmth in his face was replaced by a deep, controlled anger. The waiter nodded quickly, speaking in a hushed voice. "She wasn't supposed to talk to guests. Her boss caught her and fired her on the spot. She left the hotel a few minutes ago." Keanu's jaw tightened. He ran a hand through his hair, taking a deep breath to contain his frustration. "She was just asking for an autograph, for her grandson." "I know," the waiter said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's not fair." Keanu agreed. It wasn't just unfair, it was cruel. He thought back to the moment he had signed the notebook. He had seen Maria's hands trembling, her eyes filled with something deeper than admiration, a desperate need to bring joy to someone she loved. And now, because of that, she had lost her job? Keanu wasn't the type of person to stand by and do nothing. He straightened, his decision made. "Where's the manager?" The waiter pointed toward the far side of the ballroom. Keanu didn't hesitate. With determined strides, he made his way through the crowd. People noticed. Conversations paused. Eyes followed him. Keanu Reeves never caused a scene, but something was about to happen. Keanu's expression darkened as he spotted the hotel manager. He wasn't going to let this slide, not tonight. Keanu Reeves wasn't an actor who caused trouble. He wasn't the kind to demand attention or make a scene, but this was different. His long strides carried him toward the man he was looking for, Mr. Langley, the hotel supervisor who had fired Maria. Langley was in the middle of a conversation with a wealthy guest when he noticed Keanu approaching. His polite smile wavered for just a second, but he quickly masked it with his usual professional indifference. "Mr. Reeves, what a pleasure. Is there something I can assist you with?" Keanu didn't return the pleasantries. "I just heard about the cleaning lady, the one who asked for my autograph." Langley stiffened slightly but kept his face neutral. "Ah, yes, she was let go. Unfortunately, staff members are not allowed to interact with guests. It's protocol." Keanu's gaze hardened. Protocol? His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it now. A woman who has worked here for nearly 2 decades was fired. For asking for an autograph? A simple favor? Langley's face remained blank. "Rules exist for a reason, Mr. Reeves. If we allow one employee to break them, others will follow. The hotel must maintain a certain level of professionalism." Keanu took a step closer. His voice lowered, but somehow it became even more powerful. "Tell me something, Mr. Langley. Do you think that was the right thing to do?" Langley hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "It's not about what I think, sir. It's about company policy." Keanu's lips pressed into a thin line. Around them, people had started to notice. Conversations had slowed. Eyes turned toward them. The gala was supposed to be a celebration of generosity, of charity. And yet, here was a hotel firing an elderly cleaning lady over something so insignificant. Keanu saw the hypocrisy plain as day, and he wasn't the only one. A murmur began to spread through the crowd. People whispered, "Is that Keanu Reeves? What's going on?" One of the reporters, sensing that something was happening, discreetly lifted his phone camera. Keanu took a deep breath, his expression softening just slightly. "Listen, I understand rules. I understand that hotels need order, but what I don't understand is why you'd punish someone for showing a little humanity." Langley remained silent. Keanu crossed his arms. She wasn't asking for herself. She was doing it for her sick grandson. A woman nearby gasped. More whispers, more eyes turning toward them. Langley shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves, but my decision stands." Keanu's expression darkened. He never used his fame to demand special treatment. But tonight, he would make an exception. "Then I guess I'll have to do something about it myself." Langley frowned. "Excuse me?" Keanu turned away, pulling out his phone. The entire room watched in silence as he began to type. Less than a minute later, he looked up, his face unreadable. "I just posted about this. I wonder how the world will feel about a hotel that fires elderly women for being kind." Langley's face lost color instantly. People around them pulled out their phones. Some guests had already seen the post. It was spreading, fast. Langley's jaw clenched. He had made a mistake, a big one. Langley's eyes darted across the room, realizing how many people were watching. The weight of Keanu's words and his influence was about to change everything. Mr. Langley's face drained of color as the realization set in. This wasn't just an internal issue anymore. Keanu Reeves had just made it public. Guests murmured among themselves, phones in hand, scrolling through the actor's post. Some began whispering, others stared directly at Langley, their expressions shifting from curiosity to judgment. Langley swallowed hard. He had seen PR disasters before, but never had one unraveled so quickly, right before his eyes. "Mr. Reeves, I'm sure there's a way to resolve this," he stammered, his once firm voice now laced with panic. Keanu, still holding his phone, raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Langley hesitated, glancing around the room. Some guests had already started recording. There was no way out of this. With a forced smile, he adjusted his tie and took a sharp breath. "Perhaps we acted too hastily. Let's discuss how to fix this situation." Keanu's expression remained unreadable. "First, you're going to call Maria, you're going to apologize, and you're going to offer her job back." Langley winced but nodded. "Of course, right away." Maria was still walking through the cold streets, gripping the notebook like a lifeline. She hadn't told Tomas yet. How could she? Her thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions, grief, anger, but most of all, fear. Without her job, how would she keep paying for the medical expenses, the hospital visits, the rent? Her phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. She frowned at the number. It was the hotel. For a brief moment, she considered ignoring it. But then, with a sigh, she answered. "Maria, it's Mr. Langley," came the voice on the other end. Her stomach tightened. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. A long pause, then finally, "We made a mistake. We want you to come back." Maria nearly stumbled mid-step. "What?" Langley cleared his throat, his usual coldness replaced by something almost resembling regret. "We overreacted. We'd like to offer you your position back. And of course, we'll compensate you for the trouble." Maria blinked, completely stunned. But then something clicked. This wasn't because he had a sudden change of heart. This was because of Keanu. A warmth spread through her chest. She exhaled sharply, gripping the phone. "I'll be there soon." Maria hesitated before stepping inside. The same doors she had exited in humiliation now welcomed her, as if nothing had happened. She expected to feel small. She expected to feel ashamed. But as soon as she stepped inside, something surprising happened. People applauded. She froze. The staff, the waiters, the guests, they were clapping for her. She turned, completely bewildered, as Keanu approached her, his expression gentle. "Welcome back, Maria," he said softly. Her hands trembled. She looked at the crowd, then back at him. "Mr. Reeves, I don't know what to say." Keanu smiled. "Then don't say anything, just take this." He held out an envelope. Maria's eyes widened. With hesitant fingers, she took it and opened it, expecting maybe a letter or a kind note. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a check, a large check. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. This is too much. Keanu shook his head. It's for Thomas. Medical expenses, anything he needs. No strings attached. Tears welled up in her eyes. She couldn't believe it. The man she had admired from a distance, her grandson's hero, had just changed her life. And yet, Keanu wasn't finished. I also have one more thing. He pulled out a small envelope and handed it to her. Maria's hands were shaking as she opened it. Inside were 2 VIP tickets to the premiere of his next movie. I'd love for you and Thomas to come. The weight of everything crashed down on her at once. She had lost everything tonight, and yet somehow she had gained so much more. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Keanu simply smiled. You don't need to thank me. Just tell Thomas I can't wait to meet him. Maria held the tickets in her hands, overwhelmed with emotion. But she had no idea that this story was far from over, because soon the entire world would know what had happened. Maria left the Grand Crystal Hotel that night, feeling as if she were walking on air. Clutched in her hands were 2 things she never expected to hold: a check that would change her grandson's life and VIP tickets to meet his hero. She had walked in that night as an invisible cleaning lady. She had walked out as the woman who had touched Keanu Reeves's heart. But what Maria didn't know was that her story was already spreading like wildfire. By the time Maria got home, exhausted but filled with hope, something incredible was happening. Keanu Reeves's social media post about the incident had gone viral. News outlets had picked up on the story within hours. Headlines flooded the internet. Keanu Reeves stands up for hotel worker fired over autograph request. Grandmother fired for asking Keanu Reeves for autograph. His response will make you cry. #Justice for Maria trends worldwide after Keanu calls out hotel. The internet exploded with reactions. People flooded the Grand Crystal Hotel's website and social media, demanding answers. How do you fire someone for such a small act of kindness? Keanu Reeves is a legend, and this hotel should be ashamed. She worked there for 20 years and they treated her like this? Disgusting. The backlash was immediate. Within 24 hours, the hotel issued a public apology, claiming the incident was a misunderstanding and that they were reviewing internal policies to ensure fairness for all employees. But for the world, it was too late. The damage had been done. Maria sat on the edge of her modest couch, still trying to process everything. She had just told Thomas what had happened, about Keanu, the autograph, and the incredible gift. The boy, still frail from his illness, clutched the signed notebook to his chest as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Grandma, I get to meet Keanu Reeves?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria ran her fingers through his hair, smiling despite her exhaustion. "Yes, mi amor, you do." A sudden knock at the door startled them both. Maria hesitated before getting up. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her heart nearly stopped. Standing outside was a group of journalists, cameras in hand. "Miss Esteban, can we have a word?" one of them asked. "How do you feel about Keanu Reeves helping you? What would you like to say to the world?" Maria's eyes widened. She had spent her entire life in the background, unseen and unheard. Now, suddenly, the world wanted to know her story. She hesitated, unsure of what to say. Then, slowly, she turned and looked back inside, where Thomas sat, hugging his precious autograph, his face glowing with joy. That was all that mattered. She took a deep breath, stepped forward, and spoke. "I just want to say thank you to Keanu, to everyone who has shown kindness. And I hope this reminds people that sometimes a little bit of kindness can change a life." The reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. The world was listening. Maria never expected to be in the spotlight. But now her story was spreading faster than she could imagine. And soon it would reach someone very unexpected. The days that followed were unlike anything Maria had ever experienced. She had spent decades in the shadows, unnoticed in a world that often overlooked people like her, the cleaners, the workers, the invisible hands that made everything run smoothly. But now the world knew her name. Maria's story wasn't just about a lost job or a famous actor's kindness. It became a symbol of something greater. It was about humanity in a world that often felt cold. The internet continued buzzing with messages of support, outrage, and admiration. Keanu Reeves once again proving he's the best human being on the planet. This story made me cry. We need more kindness in the world. Maria represents millions of hardworking people. Let's remember to appreciate them. And then, something unexpected happened. A GoFundMe campaign was launched by a stranger, someone moved by Maria's story. "Let's give Maria and Thomas the life they deserve," the campaign read. Within days, donations flooded in from around the world. $10, $50, $500. People gave what they could. By the end of the week, the campaign had raised over $150,000. Maria was overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you all," she said in a short video, holding back tears. "I never expected this, but I promise every penny will go toward taking care of Thomas." When the day of the movie premiere arrived, Thomas could hardly contain his excitement. Dressed in a tiny tuxedo, he held tightly to his grandmother's hand as they walked down the red carpet, surrounded by flashing cameras and cheering fans. And then, there he was. Keanu Reeves stood at the end of the carpet waiting for them, a huge smile on his face. Thomas froze in disbelief. Keanu knelt down, opening his arms. "Come here, little guy." Thomas ran straight into them. Maria watched, tears slipping down her face, as her grandson hugged his hero, not just an actor, but the man who had changed their lives. Keanu took the notebook from Thomas and flipped through the drawings once again. "You know, I might need you to design some characters for my next movie." Thomas's eyes widened in shock. "Really?" Keanu grinned. "Absolutely." That night, Maria sat beside Thomas in the best seats in the theater, watching the film not just as fans, but as special guests. As the lights dimmed and the movie began, she took a deep breath, finally allowing herself to exhale. She had walked into that hotel as just a cleaner. She walked out as a grandmother who had changed the world just by keeping a promise. And in the end, it wasn't about fame. It wasn't about the money. It was about kindness. Because sometimes, one small act of kindness creates waves that reach farther than we can ever imagine. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.